Catherine, can you
Hi
hear me?
there.
Hello. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So my name is Mika. It's nice to meet you. This is the company I work for is called XCures. The company really focuses on cancer patients and helping organize their data and help them manage their data. So when they're going to multiple different visits and different providers, they can keep it in order. We also help patients identify treatment options when there's a question about, what are the actual options that are out there. But this podcast, and the reason that we do it is we really want cancer patients and to have an opportunity to share with each other and with the world, like kind of their journey and their story, and really importantly, kind of the lessons learned and going through this experience. So, thank you very much for being here, first and foremost, and then tell us about you and your story. And let's start there.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited about the idea of having help organizing all the medical information and everything. I was diagnosed in 2015 with familial adenomatous polyposis,
Mhm.
FAP. It's a colorectal cancer hereditary syndrome. Usually it runs in families. I'm the first in my family to have it. When I was diagnosed via my first colonoscopy, my entire colon was full of precancerous polyps. So many that just they couldn't get a sample of colon that didn't have polyps. The largest polyps were removed during that appointment, and fortunately, pathology came back that everything was precancerous. The largest polyps were starting to mutate into cancer, but hadn't quite. So in 2016, I had a proctocolectomy. I had my colon and rectum removed. And I kind of, on top of that, with FAP, you're also at greater risk for several other cancers. 2015, I was also diagnosed with thyroid cancer, which is connected with FAP. And then in 2017, diagnosed with desmoid tumors, which are technically not cancers because they don't metastasize, but they are non-cancerous growth in connective tissues,
Mhm.
but they can be very problematic. They cut off blood supply and can kill organs.
So, Catherine, I have a question for you right away. You have this. I assume it's fairly rare. I actually don't know that much about this particular genetic syndrome. You have this rare genetic syndrome. It's not something you would have expected to find out about. Suddenly, you find out you haven't. You have to start making these are really big decisions, right? Of going through major medical treatment, surgeries, and that sort of thing. How how did you process? First of all, how did you learn about it, and then how did you process that? That is a incredible thing to go through, a scary thing.
Yeah, it was very difficult. Basically, it felt like the world, fell out from under my feet. It was the week of my sister's wedding that we found out, so it just was a lot. The processing part was difficult. I have a lot of medical PTSD because of it. Um, Mostly leaning on my family. My family is amazing, just amazing support, and just taking it one day at a time. My dad's an amazing researcher, so he helped researching everything and kind of shopped around for a care team that I felt cared um, about me. And we've my family was always like, we'll go anywhere for treatment or tests. I've had several surgeries at Cleveland Clinic.
Mm.
I've gone to MD Anderson and several places in Seattle where I live. So the processing has been really hard. I definitely am not an
Yeah.
expert on it. Um, and yeah,
Well, you're an expert by going through it.
yeah,
So you said a really interesting thing just now, which is you had to find a care team that cared, right? Were there care teams without that you just didn't feel were right? How that
Yes,
choice is a very personal choice, right? Around
it
how,
is.
yeah.
Especially the first choice for what surgeries I was going to do to remove the colon and rectum. The main decision I had was whether would remove the colon first and then later remove the rectum. There's I think it's 50% chance of rectal cancer with FAP. I didn't have any rectal polyps to start with, but the main concern is that removing the colon and rectum together scars the fallopian tubes. And so the first surgeon we went to, who is really well known in the Seattle area for doing J-pouch surgeries, which is what I initially had instead of an ostomy. We went to him and he told me that if it was his daughter, he would have her do it in 2 stages, have colon removed, get pregnant, wait 6 weeks after birth, and then have rectum removed. And he just was so he was rude, he was very clinical. I actually walked out of the appointment just sobbing because he just was he was not a nice surgeon. I don't know if it was a day or whatever, but he was all about his experience and his accolades. And yeah, so we ended up moving. We went to a different place. We met with the surgeon and her team, and it was 100% different. We sat at a round table. It was before COVID, so it was my now husband, my parents, and I sitting around a round table. They cared. They wanted to know like who I was besides this. And at the end of the meeting, her assistant gave me a hug, and just like I was like, I'm in good
Yeah.
hands. Like they're looking at the whole picture. So yeah,
It kind of just startled me when you said it. A care team who cares. Those two words kind of meaning two completely different things, right?
yeah.
In the context there, but it sounds like you found the fit for you and your
I did.
family. And
It's been difficult with FAP is extremely rare. It's extremely rare to be the first case in a family, and I seem to be the one that gets all the really rare side effects or the rare things happening, including desmoid tumors, which are extremely rare themselves, but then even more rare to have FAP related ones. And so we've had that surgeon who was amazing. I loved her. She was great, but she now won't work on me because I'm too difficult a case. And she claims that because I don't have a or colon or a rectum, that a colorectal surgeon isn't the right surgeon for me. So we've had to travel around to find doctors who will take me on as a patient. My GI doctor had to retire unexpectedly, and it took me 4 months to find a GI in Seattle who would take me on as a
so,
patient.
so let me understand. You're actually just trying to find doctors who are willing to work on your case. Am I hearing that
Yes.
correctly? And
Um,
what do they
yeah.
say? Like why? I know it's a rare disease, but what's the what's the issue? Do you think that they're really struggling with?
The issue is that um, it's also rare, and that it's just my body's too complicated for them. There's too many side effects with the desmoid tumors. Every surgery I get can lead to development of more tumors. And it's really just I feel they're just worried about liability of, something going wrong and liability. I've finally found I was seeing Dr. James Church at Cleveland Clinic, who is known around the world for being an FAP GI surgeon. He's retired.
Hmm.
And so it took several months for me to find a new surgeon who would take me on. And I found a great surgeon in Seattle who is willing to take the risk. to
So it sounds
operate
like you
on
find
me.
the right person. You're hitting at one of, I think, things I hear from people, that finding the right care team, and the right care team, not only from kind of your preferences fit. I think I like preferences in terms of how you interact with them and the way that you're able to express kind of your desires for care, but
Mhm.
then also kind of what they're willing to do, right? And particularly in case of rare, complex, or particularly advanced cases, right? When you're kind of balancing the aggressiveness, right, and safety. How do you think about kind of the aggressiveness of your care versus your safety, and like how do you balance that in your own mind? I mean, that's a
It's difficult. I think in the past month, I've had kind of what actually have been the hardest decisions. I thought deciding to have my colon and rectum removed was gonna be the hardest decision, but, my current desmoid tumors are at the point where they're cutting off the blood supply to my small intestine and creating chronic bowel obstructions. And I've had to decide whether to try surgery to remove them, which is risky. I'll likely lose more bowel and could be at the point where I will lose enough bowel that I will end up on TPN for life because I won't have enough length of small intestine to absorb nutrients. Versus the other option, which is trying oral chemo. There's not many chemos for desmoid tumors, and there's an oral chemo which has good results usually, but it's very slow acting. And so I'll be on it for at least 18 months and probably on and off for the rest of my life. But it's trying to decide which is, we don't want to wait too long to soften or get rid of the tumor before it causes permanent bowel damage. So it's been very real lately, just having to make decisions that
How do you learn about these options? Because it's rare, right? Like, where are you doing the research yourself, or are you have like
um I
who's
do
figuring this
some
out?
I do some of the research, kind of more the using social media platforms and support groups. My parents do a lot of the more academic research and looking for what's being done around the world. There's quite a few studies kind of going on in Italy right now for desmoids. But so it's really just a combination of me kind of talking to people. There's a great foundation, the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation.
Hmm.
They do an amazing job of kind of collating all information. But yeah, it's just kind of like, kind of like picking up pieces here and there of medications that help. And every time I have to go to my doctors and say, I've heard about this. I'd like to try it. And then they haven't heard of it. So they have to research it.
Why haven't they heard of, like, you think you go to the doctors, is like they should have heard of this stuff,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Or
it's so rare.
okay.
Most doctors don't even know they're not even taught about FAP. I actually had a guy I went to preschool with. He was studying to be a doctor in Israel, and on Rare Disease Day, he said the teacher said, like, here's something called FAP. You will never meet anyone with it. And that day, I posted on Instagram for Rare Disease Day about FAP, and he just was like, I just was taught about this, and it's so rare that it's taught about. So it's not just one source of information. I think that's the problem. So it's just gathering little
Just
bits
putting it
from
all
around the
together.
world.
It's interesting you talk about rare, and part of what I always think about is I actually think a lot of cancers are kind of rare. There's some big buckets that people put in, but even talking with some of the other folks I've talked with on the show today, they all have like their individual,
Hmm.
right? Each of us have that. And so I think, I just, as I talk to people, I think, wow, the information just needs to be personal, right?
It
And
does.
there's what you want as a patient, there's what we know, and there's this big gap, right, between all of these things that just needs to be filled. So, Catherine, thank you so much for coming on. Just as a kind of closing question, is there any kind of big lesson, message that you'd like the audience to know? Something that has really kind of been your strength, or the thing that you lean on during this whole thing? What's the most important kind of take home for you?
Two things. I think for me, it's advocacy. You need to advocate for yourself. That's why I'm alive. I had at least 6 years of symptoms, rectal bleeding. I was told it was IBS, it was nothing, but I kept pushing, and that's why I'm alive. And the other thing is that for patients to have the confidence that they know their body best.
Yeah.
They are the expert on their body. The doctor may be an expert on their diagnosis, but we're the ones that live in our bodies, and often we have insight that can be crucial. And if your doctor doesn't take it seriously, it can be detrimental. So I think advocate for yourself, for those around you, and just remember that you know your body best.
You're so empowered, Catherine. Truly inspiring to me today. So thank you again for coming on and sharing your story with the audience and with me. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing. It
Okay.
means a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Bye bye.